Thursday Nights Reasoning. I am the producer and host, Sister YaYa Marin Coleman, and our co-host, the Breda Dean Flowers, the president of the Public Service Union. Good night, Breda Dean.
Good night, Sister YaYa, and good night, Belize, and good night, viewers from across the globe who may tune in or who will have the privilege of reviewing these shows at a future date. As always, Sister YaYa, I'm very pleased and happy to be here. I got some very good news today, but it could also spell very bad news for this reasoning session on Thursday nights at this hour, which is synonymous, Sister YaYa, with what our good Sister Trisha is currently going through. And as you know, Sister Trisha is the one who would normally host these shows, or quote unquote technician. We have been nominated to participate in some studies with Cipriani College out of Trinidad, and I was not sure, or I was unaware that classes started today. So I will probably have to rethink, Sister YaYa, or I will have to rethink, sorry, the timing of this show. I want it to continue, and I have no objection to making myself available, but it would seem that we're going to have a Thursday night clash going forward.
Well, unless we'll just have to find someone else to be the facilitator.
Yeah.
Because we want to be consistent with the time and the day. And this is our 14th week, and I met Breda Dean for the first time today. I think he's been co-hosting for 13 weeks. Respect to Sister Trisha and the opportunity she has to be trained. I say to people all the time, being trained is not enough. If you're not politically conscious and understand that the investment that has been made for you to have the opportunity to train is for you to then give back freely to your community for all our liberation. So time will tell with Sister Trisha and the new information she's been taught, how that information will enhance her life and ours. So I see Sister Musile, Cynthia Pitch just joined us. Tonight we're focusing on the stevedores and the cane farmers as Belizean workers. There's so many Belizean workers at this particular time who are unemployed, who are frustrated, who feel coerced to some extent in having to take a vaccination to remain employed. So Belizean workers are under a lot of stress, more so than usual. And the hope is that on Thursday nights, this is a place where we could come and share and talk about the experiences of Belizean workers. It's very much rooted in research to look back at the past, because it's not something Belizeans are known to do in this generation in a public space, and see the lessons that we can learn from the past. So I shared with Brother Dean earlier that I saw on Breaking Belize News about a little over 4 hours ago that the Belize Sugarcane Farmers Association are at an impasse with the management of BSI ASR, and it's been said that the sugarcane season should begin the end of November, early December, and a contract has not been signed. From my understanding, Brother Dean, and you could share what your understanding is, that the Belize Sugarcane farmers want to renegotiate the entire contract, or quite a bit of it, and the executives at the Belize Sugar Industry and ASR are not willing to do that at this point. They're saying it's not feasible. And so and remember, to my understanding, the Belize Sugarcane Farmers Association has the largest membership of cane farmers. These cane farmers own smaller plots of land compared to the other association with larger with cane farmers who have larger acreage of sugarcane planted out. So what's the vibes that you got from that news item, Brother Dean? So we'll start up where we are presently, and then we'll work our way backward. What's the vibes you got from that news item, Brother Dean?
Well, what I got from the news item is that where the commercial agreement is concerned, and I trust the commercial agreement is tied to this 65% for the workers, or sorry, for the kin farmers, and 35% for the factory, ASI, BSI, ASR. Now, we must also understand that when we talk about 65-35, we're talking about cost and revenue. So the farmers are responsible to cover 65% of the costs related to milling and producing sugar, and they equally enjoy 65% of the revenues. It is that agreement, it is that commercial agreement that they're saying we would like to renegotiate. The news item does not suggest any new percentages by the Belize Cane Farmers Association other than to say that they want to renegotiate that. So we can only assume that they want to go north of 65%.
That they would want to go what?
North, right? North meaning to increase the percentage.
There's as we were talking about today, Brother Dean, as much as we have an intimate relationship with sugar, most of us in Belize, how much we do not know about the sugar industry, how it came about. We just don't know the process, that there's a difference between a cane cutter and a cane farmer, and how the kind of investment cane farmers may make. And like most farmers, it's a risky profession to be in, because you could have floods, you could have drought, you could have an attack of insects, and the money that you may have borrowed from the bank or that you invested, you're not getting that kind of returns. There's so many variables. Yet there's also the opportunity that that does not happen, and then you may, it's worth the investment, the sacrifice, and the time. But when I saw that 65-35, I wondered how that, because my understanding is that with the, and I posted an article from the Amandal from November 5th, 2013, called The Sugar Struggle. And in that article, it said around 1964, when Belize got self-government, Tate and Lai, the world leader in sugar refining, invested in Belize, and they built the modern Tower Hill factory in Orange Walk. The Libertad factory was already there. And it really became, because people then, a number of people moved north to get employment, and it became a real mixer of different groups of people and culture. And so it's the, yes, so I don't know how that arrangement was made, because it was very much, to my understanding, it was an opportunity, whereas prior in Belize City, you have the Creole, so-called Creole group of people benefited financially by working for the government, and then everybody else was just, well, they got the, in this case, it was the Masewal Maya people, who the European oppressors called Yucatec Maya, that they then got an influx of money into their families, communities, into the country's economy. And so we're talking about working class people. So I often wondered, how did it begin? Did it begin at 65%? Do you know, Brother Dean?
I am unable to see whether or not that how that commercial agreement
I don't know either.
has evolved over time, Sister YaYa. I wouldn't be able to comment on that other than to say that
We will have, I've invited, it'll be next month, we'll have a cane farmer as one of our guests next month. It's best to have cane farmers and stevedores or workers to speak for themselves. That is absolutely important. I just briefly wanted to share with our listeners, viewers, those who will be streaming online, just quickly, to make the connection between the stevedores, who are majority Black brothers at the Port of Belize Limited, to say that they're the children of African people who always resisted from the time they were kidnapped, and to make a note that when we talk about African people, that we don't only frame the conversation within that of the 400 years of our enslavement. That was 400 years that interrupted thousands of years of African people contribution to world civilization. We're talking about a conservative, and I say this whenever I have the conversation because many of us don't know, and I really do not want to be a part of the singular narrative when we talk about African people. We talk primarily about the enslavement of our African ancestors. That was 400 years. So if we use a conservative timeline, we're talking about 6,257 years ago, using the Gregorian calendar, before the Coming Era, 4,236 years before the Coming Era, and you add the 2021, we're approximately 6,257 years ago. Yeah, that, Brother Dean, approximately 6,257 years ago, African people were using an astronomical calendar that was already 1,460 years old. So the 6,257 years ago is a conservative timeline. And then on the continuum of our African ancestors being kidnapped, you have colonialism and now neoliberalism, that our people always resisted the inhumane treatment that they were forced to live with, and many of them died. Remember, before 1838, African people were not seen as human beings. Not that they were after 1838, not that we are today in 2021, considering that most people work in a system that does not pay them adequately to have a living wage. And that's why the rights of workers are so important. So I just wanted to make note that from Towards Understanding Belize's Multicultural History and Identity by Joseph Ernest Ondofe Iyo, in chapter 1, he made a note to say, there's also evidence of the base settlers appealing for military aid in the face of Spanish attacks on their settlements in 1745. The colonial document gives us an idea of the size of the population and also the relationship between African slaves and their white masters. The document states that the population did not exceed, quote, 50 white men and about 120 Negroes, which number of the latter we cannot tell how many may prove true to the time of engagement. So it is said that there was a Battle of St. George's Key in 1798, yet in 1745, it's already documented 53 years before that we cannot depend on these African people to be in solidarity with us. So that's why it's so important to go back and check the archives for ourselves. And then it's not often that we get to hear an example. And so I wanted to share, I don't know if I've shared this before. Tell me if I've shared this before. It says that the settlers were perpetually living in fear of their African slaves cannot be overstated. As the quotation below shows, the Negroes belonging to one Mr. Thomas Cook rebelled, killed their master and the carpenter, robbed the house of everything that was valuable, and fled to the woods. A few days after, they murdered 3 men in a small schooner of mine that went into the New River to load logwood, and the poor people, unhappily falling into the hands of those inhuman wretches, fell a sacrifice, and they sunk the vessel. For want of power to compel people to take arms against them, we have not been able to raise a party, and they still continue in rebellion and have entirely stopped the communication of the New River, although there are not above 10 or 12 men able to carry arms amongst them all. And if they do not destroy one another by their own cabals, as we have some hopes they will do, 2 or 3 being killed by the others, we do not know when it will end. Quoted in Boland, 1988, page 21. So again, it's to tell you how long our people have been resisting. So when I subtract the minimum 1765 from 2021, we're talking about 256 years of rebellion. And then I'll say this one and then give the mic to Brother Dean. In this case, we're talking about the Masewal Maya, who the colonizers call the Yucatec Maya. And I'm again reading from Towards Understanding Belize's Multicultural History and Identity. Uh, in the past, some historians claim that when the British settlers came in the 17th century, Belize was uninhabited, but we have seen that the Maya still lived in the area. As the British moved deeper into the interior, they came into contact with them. The Maya strongly resisted British attempts to take over their territory. In 1788, the British reported a Maya attack on woodcutters at New River. New River again, eh?
Yeah.
In 1802, troops were ordered to be sent upriver to punish the Indians who are committing depredations upon the mahogany works. There were many such conflicts throughout the 19th century. Despite their strong resistance, the Maya were forced back by the British. By 1839, they had retreated into the forest around San Ignacio, but they did not stop fighting. The Maya continued to attack mahogany camps and to control inland areas of Belize. And one of the joys that I get out of when I do research is when you find the same information in another source. So in the Journal of Belizean Affairs, June 1974, it also cited that same attack on the New River, thus an attack of the wild Indians. No, look, they send for help now. It said the Maya who lived in the west of this line resisted British encroachment upon their territory. Thus, an attack of the wild Indians was reported as having occurred on the New River in 1788, and in 1802, a detachment of troops were requested to be sent upriver to punish the Indians who are committing depredations upon the mahogany works. Unfortunately, it is not recorded which river was involved in that case, but a request in 1807 for arms and ammunition for gangs working up the river at Hogstebank who have been attacked by Indians is more helpful in placing the frontier of Hogstebank was a little above Orange Walk on the Belize River, probably close to Willow Creek. So the point is that the resistance of stevedores and cane farmers, whose ancestors were African people, and Masewal Maya, known as the Yucatec Maya, um, came from a line of resistance. And then all the way through, I found additional information in the 1919, we spoke about the uprising of the African people, the revolt. But I was so I mean, when I tell you, I was just absolutely stunned when I saw additional information about how many people around that time period were resisting. You had in the 19, okay, I'll read this one paragraph for children now and done, but it's to show you that Belizean people have consistently, when it came to labor rights, consistently, and I mean across the board. So this last one that I'm reading is from Colonial to Nation, Women Activists in the Gendering of Politics in Belize, 1912-1982, Anna S. McPherson. It says many urban petitions in 1918 demanded wage increases. One of the earliest was all female from 6 pupil nurses whom Dr. Thomas Gann, the principal medical officer, supported, observing that they were overworked and underfed. The government's ultimately positive response to their petition came under Hart Bennett after months of bureaucratic delays. One victory. Next came the first groups of war veterans who returned home to high unemployment and official reluctance to grant them farmland, owing to the superous belief that Creole men could not do agricultural work. On the heels of their protests, the leading clergy of all denominations petitioned for increases in teachers' salaries to compensate for price inflation. Now, the head of the different churches petitioned for that increase for the teachers. Late in the year, just as the mahogany gangs were returning to town, the police demanded a pay hike. Just as Gone had supported his pupils' nurses, so Superintendent Watt backed the constables, arguing that their pay of $20 to $30 a month was insufficient to keep a family fed, clothed, housed, and out of debt. He recommended a minimum of $40 a month. Now, we could start to track what they were making then. We're talking about 1918, what police officers were making and what they're making now. And you got a numbers person, Dean and Brother Philip. Good night, Brother Hubert. And then lastly, it says this family wage does not apply to female government workers. Now listen to a one sister though. Poorhouse attendant Catherine Savory petitioned for a pay hike from $8 a month, which unofficial Archibald Usher decried as hardly a living wage. I've often wondered how she manages to subsist. Usher and his fellow appointed legislators granted her a raise to $12 a month, which presumably put their minds at rest. So, and be quiet now.
No, I think that the information that you're sharing, YaYa, is very relevant. As usual, I taking my notes and enjoying the new revelation since I have personally never taken uh, any classes or done any review to understand the sugarcane industry, where it came from, how it has evolved, and where it is today. And so I appreciate how you're tying all this history together, since what you hope to achieve tonight, of course, is for us to have a conversation surrounding the Africans and the Masewal Mayas and
Masewal.
Masewal. And I
Masewal.
hear that I hear about several, I think I hear about three different type of Mayas, but this is the first time I'm hearing about the Masewal Mayas.
We identify them as the so you have the Yucatec, the mind just gone totally blank.
Yucatec,
Mopan, Yucatec, and the Quechua Mayas.
Quechua, yeah, those are.
So the people who we call Yucatec Maya, which is very important to understand, that that's the colonizers' way of describing this group of people. Those people describe themselves as Masewal Maya. It's an indigenous word. And there are two Facebook pages. I'll make sure I post them in the chat group where you can go and find out more about them. And they're very clear that of who they are. One of the brothers who I communicate with frequently would say that it's a mindset. They're very, they hold on to their indigenous spiritual ways of being. Besides their food and their cultural clothing, they know their oral stories, and they still use the experiences from the past to help them in decision making today. So they're Masewal Maya from the north,
yeah,
and the west.
Yeah, which we know today as the Yucatec Maya. Yeah, okay. So what we've uncovered so far then is that the sugarcane was introduced in the north. I think we can agree on that, and hence the reason it remains a stronghold in the north. And as we all know, of course, that includes the Corozal and the Orinjuak district. The Orinjuak district being, of course, the district that remains standing as far as sugarcane mill is concerned. Most recently, of course, we now have one out west, Santander. And they may very well form a part of this conversation as it relates to this commercial agreement, yeah. And because remember, the Minister of Agriculture was proposing that, I believe, and I could be wrong here, or I don't quote me on this, but I think it was about 20,000 or more tons of sugar, of cane, that he was proposing to be brought to Santander for this cane crop that just finished. So I think that this will be a hard fight, in my opinion, between ASR, BSI, and the Belize sugarcane farmers of the north, because I believe the government, via the Minister of Agriculture, has already shown their hands as to where quote unquote competition is concerned, who are offering the better price that we are going. So this will be an interesting conversion leading up to the start of the sugarcane crop, which is November, December.
And we do know from recent memory, as well as the past, that the Masewal Maya people, their response when they resist is oftentimes different from maybe the Belize City folks. It says here, it talked about rural petitions came in again in the 1980. Um, First was a collective one from the largely Maya villages. This is 1918, 1919 of Yo Creek, Guinea Grass, San Lazaro, Trinidad, Chan Pine Ridge, and San Miguel, all in the north. Fully 142 milperos, all men, signed on to the protest. BEC's rent demands, gaining support from the district commissioner, who feared that harsh conditions would drive the peasantry across the border into Mexico. Quickly informed by officials, BEC's manager characterized the Maya farmers as lazy, destructive, and willfully refusing to pay rent, a representation that persuaded the government not to intervene. Although the superintendent of the botanical station would read the petition, regretted that this misunderstanding should have occurred at this time when all the corn for food is urgently needed. His idea of teaching this common ignorant class of men the rudiments of crop rotation was rejected. Indeed, the farmers who petitioned in the name of British justice in 1918 were by 1920 selling their corn across the border to Mexican chicle gangs, leaving Orange Walk starved for tortillas. So again, they could show you better than they could tell you. But the times have changed. And with both the stevedores and the cane farmers, they're going up against multinationals. This is where you could correct me if I'm wrong as a union leader, where the hope would be that the state would look out for the people of Belize.
YaYa, in my limited period of time on the face of this earth, I don't know that I've ever encountered a period in time whereby the state looked out for the people of Belize. I think that being a particularly an importing country, a net importer of goods, it has always been that, at least to my recollection, that the government has always championed foreign direct investment. And the minute you champion foreign direct investment and you live for that, there is no way then that you will ever be for workers, because a foreign direct investment means an expatriate bringing in his or her money and exploiting the resources of the country, whether it be the human resource or the natural resources. And that is what, as far as I'm aware, every single government during my 4 decades on the face of this earth has preached. No, so I'm kind of baffled by your statement that you would think that the government should be for the people, because that has not been what I have seen, at least as I stated, during my limited time on the face of this earth.
Well, I know what has been the reality. According to UNO, we say UNO, the independent country, with Elizabeth II head of state, and I tell a lie, but according to all UNO, September they go in job on yourself, on yourself independent, the people ain't gonna vote, but then people represent their best interest. That's why I said that. According to the system, a democracy going to say have that the people ain't vote for them, people go represent their interests. Now, what actually happens and what they say for happen, they're two different things.
Yeah.
A part of that conversation too, Breda Dean and everyone who's here, is land. Land is always an issue, and it's to understand coming out of the enslavement of African people, it was intentional for people not to own land so that they could be wage earners. So this is my last read, book class 730, from a history of Belize. I just thought this was interesting. It says, Even though the land was bought and sold, ownership remained in the hands of a few. Listen to this timeline. A study as late as 1971 showed that 3% of the landowners held 95% of the land, and 91% of the landowners held only 1% in small plots. This study also showed that over 90% of the freehold land in the country was owned by foreigners, and most of the land was not being used. Not that 1971. Heck, what happened in 2021? Your time, brother Dean. It's 7:30. It's time for the participants and brother Dean. Go strong.
Okay, welcome and good night again to all our participants who have joined us via Zoom and for those listening via Facebook. I trust perhaps that Brother Tate might, I'm not quite sure if Brother Tate normally follows that trend, but tonight pretty much the conversation surrounds the stevedores of the Port of Belize, who are children of Africans, and of course the Masewal Mayas, um, who represent cane farmers in today's day and age. So we simply wanted to have a conversation surrounding the history of these two um, factions, which of course are not faction when I say in terms of fighting against each other, but simply two different groups of individuals and the role they play within the sugarcane industry. So that has been the conversation tonight. Earlier, Sister YaYa was reading us some history as it relates to the introduction of the sugarcane industry in the north. And one thing you did not touch on, Sister YaYa, was looking at a little bit of history, or a brief history that I pulled up also earlier when I got into Bamapan, was the fact that there are some sugar mills that we're still able to appreciate today. And in Orange Walk, there's one in Lamanai, which is pretty much well intact, where the Maya ruin is. And there's another one down in Punta Gorda, the Serpon Sugar Mill. And that has some interesting history because that one speaks primarily of Native Americans who used to work that one, and I think I'll still need to find out exactly whether it was East Indians primarily that was working that mill down south, and which brings up the question, YaYa. When you look at the sugar mill in Lamanai, the sugar mill that exists currently in Orange Walk, and the sugar mill down south in Punta Gorda, we know those three were the principal mills. What's your view, or for the participants who are with us tonight? I haven't seen anything where it is actually saying that Black people, Africans, were working these mills, YaYa, because the mills in the north is tied primarily to the Yucatec Mayas or the Masewal, as you rightly told us they should be referred to. So
well, we have Brother David. Yeah, so and this is the participants part. So he's a historian. Looking for the 2 cents that they listen.
Well, that's interesting. Actually, I know a bit about sugar industry because I used to chair the Sugar Industry Control Board for many years, off and on, since 89, 90, well, 3 times I chaired. But the history of Serpon, as I understand it, these were indentured Indians who came to work for Confederate plantation owners who had fled the United States in the 1860s, invited by the British to come. And so they are the people who came into the Toledo district and that sugarcane going in a big way, made a lot of money out of it. And at some point in time, they departed. Some of their descendants are still in the South, meaning Confederates, the Johnsons and the Westleys and the various names that appear there are descendants of these Confederate people who came. And the East Indians, as they're called, are of course mainly found in Forest Home and Mafredai and 5 miles and right along the road and go there. That's just briefly on that, just to show you that in fact there's not much involvement of African descent people involved in the labor source was the indentured post 1838 when the British started bringing in indentured Indians to the region, mainly in Guyana, Trinidad, Jamaica. That's where the original East Indians came from to work in the South. And when that was over, there was a migration to the North because there was an inflow during the period leading up to the signing of the treaty, during the period of the caste wars. The latifundistas of Yucatan came over and finally received British protection, and so there were, and I recall maybe the name of Mayas and so on, the Corozal Petit Bourgeois crowd came in and did some sugar, mainly for the production, sugar cane planting, mainly for the production of sugar and rum. And that lasted for a while, but there was a migration of indentured, they weren't indentured by then, but then towards the latter part of the 19th century, they went to the north to work sugar. So you find them in Calcutta and Chito and other places there. And that is how that is what accounts for the senior population in that area of the country.
Let me just briefly add that there were 3 waves of Indian people that we call East Indian.
Yeah.
There was the first set that came after the enslavement of African people in 1838. Then there was a second wave in after the so-called Indian Mutiny. Then there was a third wave in the 1880s from Jamaica. I just got this book. I haven't read it yet. Have you read it, Brother David?
Which one was it?
Belize, Chapters in Migration, about the culture in Belize.
I had it some years ago, but it has a new owner who has no, the person who has it because he hasn't returned it. But that tells you quite a bit about the various demographics that occurred and people coming in, including Belgians and Germans and a whole host of people. But it's a very interesting book to read. But you're right.
When people borrow your book and I bring it back and I know they got your book.
Well, as long as they share it with somebody else, I don't mind.
Yeah. Breda Dean, where you gone? This is your segment. I was going to put in our 2 cents. Come on back. Don't try to give me no work.
Yeah. Brother Gibson, before I go on, I want to applaud you for that statement that as long as then they share it with somebody else, you know,
yeah.
I like that.
No, as long as somebody else is reading. I think he was a student. I've shared a lot of books that way.
I not support that. If you don't got my book, bring my book back. But you know what I tell myself? Yeah. Who book you have, you never care back. The karma will be the truth.
You have to check your library and see what that source.
Yeah, Brother Tate is asking for the name of the book. If you would kindly repeat it.
Oh, sorry, I never hear. It's called Peopling Belize, Chapters in Migration, St. John Robinson. It says, born in Belize in 1943, St. John Robinson grew up in Bluefields, Nicaragua, and New Orleans. He was a PhD in Spanish from Louisiana State University and is currently chair of the Department of Modern Languages at Montana State University, Billings. He is married with 3 sons. This is his first book, and this was published in 2006.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, and I read it then, so I kind of rusted on it now. But the thing is that in terms of these, well, of course, looking at the early sugarcane industry, there was a company that came in, not before Theatre Lyle, but they were the Belize Sugar Company who established a factory at Libertad in Corozal, and they started shipping sugar out in a serious way in the 1920s, if I recall. Eventually, they relocated to Tower Hill and they shut down Libertad. That caused quite a bit of economic disruption. in the late 70s, early 80s. But the important part of it is what happened with sugarcane farmers, that there was a redistribution of land that occurred that had been, and that was done through George Price. Major landholders in the north started divesting themselves of land in lieu of taxes, and that was how, coinciding and supporting the establishment of the Power Hill factory, there's a major redistribution of land that occurred. Although you will find that the licensing process is still far behind that in terms of people actually having title to land and so on. That has been a problem, a perennial problem for cane farmers. What can be said about the present organization of cane farmers is that by a constitutionally based court ruling, there was first one sole farmers organization, the Sugarcane Farmers Association of Belize, that is now 3 associations. And when you look at the composition of them, of course, the sugarcane farmers are the largest grouping, are the smaller farmers, 10 acres to 100 acres, and some of them are, of course, more than that. But what's important about them in terms of their thinking is that they align themselves with the CWU. Up to very recently, they met to understand the dynamics of what was going on. And they did not sign on to some statement that the BSI was pushing, which was signed on to by the other 2 cane farmers association, which was making this argument about, oh, well, cane farmers losing money and so on. They didn't subscribe to that because they have an understanding BSI as a multinational corporation that is exploitative, that as it is right now, they are negotiating with to get better terms for various aspects of the cane production operation.
For information, Brother Gibson, if you can just slightly pick up in there. For information purposes, can you kindly share the name of the other 2 associations which are actually factions broke away from the BCFA?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the names are right here on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember them up there.
I remember Progressive
Cane Farmers, and there's one in
San Esteban. Then got next group that's San Esteban.
There's one, yes, that's the San Esteban one, and there's one out of Corozal that's linked to whatever it is. I think it's a credit union or so. But they're more the larger cane farmers. That
I know the credit union up that Corozal, that Xavier.
They have a link with them. Actually, I've been looking at the documentation recently because they're negotiating right now. But it's just with YaYa thing, I'm sure it will come as I go along. But yes, the progressive cane farmers are one of them. I'm thinking I'm telling about the old age part of it, but
just to add, Mr. Gibson, I was speaking to
Oscar?
Alfredo Ortega.
Oh, Ortega, okay, yeah.
And he told me that Progressive is splitting into 2 now.
Yeah, they are.
So I'm trying to find out who are the new split from Progressive, because now we had 3 plus we had 3 plus 1, which was 4. So now we have 5. And what that is doing is that it's giving ESR a more competitive advantage, because when you look at what's happening in terms of the cane that is being produced,
well,
ESR is producing more of its own cane. No?
Yeah, but they won't reach the level of contention, if you want to call it that. But the thing is, all of these other cane farmers associations, except the main cane farmers association, which Ortega is a member of, all of them line up with BSI against the Sugarcane Farmers Association. BSI has manipulated them, continues to manipulate them. So they vote along with BSI when it comes to decision making on the Sugar Industry Control Board. And as a matter of fact, when it comes to
wait, you're saying anything like we know what you talk about. Run that again, because it sounds like you're saying in a street term they sell out.
Well, were they ever
Let me get the organizations are Progressive Sugarcane Farmers Association,
The main,
Corizal Sugarcane Farmers Association, and Northern Sugarcane Farmers Association are the names of the
sorry,
other three
those are the
associations.
names? All right. Well, the
Yeah.
major cane farmer association is the Belize Sugarcane Farmers Association, of which Ortega is a member. He's probably on the executive management committee for that. And they are the ones that are the largest. They are the ones who are comprise the smaller farmers up to the last enumeration was about 3,500 of them. They are the ones who are being displaced in terms of ability to survive economically. So you find a lot of them have fallen by the wayside. The smaller 10 acres, the 20 acres, they're not really economically viable because of the high cost of inputs, meaning fertilizers, etc. But they are the more militant organization, and they are more conscious. And what their general manager is Oscar Alonso, who is an old comrade, who has been with them for some years and has helped to improve the managerial capacity because of they tended to be quite cumbersome in the management of their affairs. And lots of things have happened reflecting that, but they've gotten much tighter in terms of how they do that. And they certainly have a consciousness about the production chain and the value chain, and this awareness of shipping costs and so on, which BSI has manipulated, trying to shift figures around to fare off better in terms of in terms of the final take, no? In terms of the 65-35% allocation.
I'll stop you there, but I give to inject something that we touched on earlier, and I want to say welcome to Sister Janelle Ozeta, who joined the conversation. Well, who joined us tonight. And to others who may be tuning in via Facebook, just to inform you, we're discussing the history of resistance of Africans and Masewal Mayas to colonial powers in Belize, and that has taken us, of course, to a robust discussion surrounding the sugarcane industry. This segment is dedicated to the participants who are with us tonight. Feel free at any point in time to raise your hand or jump into the conversation if you would like to ask a question or make a comment. This segment is dedicated to you. I want to reflect on where we are today, Brother Gibson. Sister YaYa spoke about, or she gave the names. I'm looking at my screen here and it's telling me Belize Sugarcane Farmers Association, which comprises of the bulk or the bigger majority of both small farmers. Then we have Progressive Sugarcane Producers Association. And then, and you said, or Brother Tate mentioned that they are splintering now into two, and the third one being, which you said is associated to St. Francis Xavier Credit Union, is my screen is telling me Corizal Sugar Cane Producers Association.
Okay, yeah.
Now, I want to fast forward to today, when me and Sister YaYa start off with, there is a news item which is saying that the previous commercial agreement that the Belize Sugarcane Farmers Association had with BSI has expired and a new agreement needs to be signed before November or December. No, I love this. You know why I love this? Because up to recent, ASR BSI position was, we need to get rid of the stevedores, and those are my words, or we need to take our sugar down south, eliminating the stevedores, because it's cheaper for us to go down south than to deal with these stevedores. No, The reason why I say I love the position of the BCFA is because if ESR, they say, it may cost them, what? I don't know. I don't know what are the figures. Maybe Brother Tate could help me out, but I think they say, well, when we go down south, we only pay 3 million, while in Belize, we may pay, I don't know, 10, whatever amount a million. This is telling me that if BCFA does not renegotiate a new commercial agreement, ESR will be walking away with a bigger chunk of money too.
Not so easy.
Right? So I love for them position that here we want. We can keep the ratio going as is.
Yeah, actually they want to increase it 70-30, but of course, you know that's going to be resisted by ESR. But the thing about that commercial agreement, they have some critical parts of it. One of the things that which the pressure will come, and they anticipate that the government will support the position, is that the whole matter of the marketing of the sugar and they're basically price takers is what the company says, and they're saying, no, they should know all aspects of that, bearing in mind that ESR is fully integrated into the refining of sugar. They are the production side. They don't own Tate and Lyle in the UK. Tate and Lyle has been a traditional purchaser, a manufacturer of refined sugar and so on. So they're trying to find the correct mechanism to be sure that the market data, all of it, is available. Now bear in mind that the government has a member of one position on the board of directors of BSI. That has always been so, but it always has been some lapdog assigned who ride the BSI program, so that it really need someone there. Whatever mechanism emerges, that board member becomes more proactive in supplying information, designated as a person who conveys that information. If it's going to be to the sugarcane board or to the farmers, and that is something that they need to work upon. It has been strongly resisted by BSI, and they've also strongly resisted a range of things, including what is to be paid from that issues as to who owns the cane at what point.
Yeah.
And then, of course, related to that would be what's happening with Santander as an alternative purchaser of sugarcane. Underlying all of this is the need to amend the sugar industry act, you know.
So if it is because McLachlan from ESR BSI is saying, while BSI is always available to discuss issues with the BCFA in a constructive way, it is not prepared to reopen key terms of the commercial agreement. To do so will lead to a stalemate and great losses to the industry. Now, to stick one pin there, we can't reach an agreement before November or December when crop open. This, in my view, and you could help me as a former chair of the Sugar Control Board, I believe that's the position you've held.
Yeah. Sugar Industry Control Board.
The Sugar Industry Control Board as a former chair. Does this then mean that BCFA is free to move its sugar to Santander?
Theoretically, yes. In the absence of an agreement, they can.
Okay.
The point is that you have to look at the movement of cane, and when Santander is taking on cane apart from its own, they will want to be a tail end procurer. And the economics of it is not favorable at this time. You don't need a road from San Felipe to Nakmanedi kind of thing to really get cheaper transportation costs to Santander. Yeah. But they would be free. Although yes, usually they want, as it is right now, the factory grinding capacity is, I think it's about 1.2 million tons of sugarcane every year. So they want to tie that down to be sure that they get at least 1.2 million, and they don't care what happens afterwards in terms of what they call a standover cane.
Yeah.
Now, what has happened this year because of this threat that they got that sugarcane could go to Santander, they were able to grind all the cane. I'm not sure what cane there.
You,
Very interesting, you know.
yeah, you got that right. Actually, the man then put out a press release
Yeah.
condemning the minister's statement for cane
Yeah.
to Santander.
Yeah, he's a cane farmer too, so he knows what the reality is. The thing is, of course, that this factory, when these people came in, they said they would be expanding the grinding capacity of the factory to maybe 1.5 million tons of sugar cane. And on that basis, cane farmers can quickly increase their production, only to find out that there's no expansion that has happened. They have not invested money. They've invested instead in producing this direct consumption sugar. In other words, they're doing more value added at the factory, which is supposed to go to the Caribbean market, which is what is being held out to the waterfront workers, the stevedores, as being the fact that those sugars will come to the beach port. No, those will be containerized. It's not going to be bulk sugar. These are bag sugar that usually containerized. So in terms of what you would make off of that is what you would make off a regular container cargo for stevedores. But they're holding that out as some kind of blandishment, but all is not lost kind of thing. But to talk about that commercial agreement again, just quickly, because I think it was too much of the session. The whole this position being stated here by ASR BSI is a negotiating position. The stalemate, yes, there was a stalemate. The cane farmers anticipate that the only weak element of that would be these other cane farmers associations.
Yeah,
and you have to look at what is their production vis-a-vis what is the Sugarcane Farmers Association's production, and what is BSI's cane growing project production. Because they have two cane growing areas, and the acreages have been increasing against totally resisted by the cane farmers, because it's their strategy to be less reliant. They would love to be like Santander, where it's highly mechanized, large land acres, they're not individual plots or small acreages, so which is good for mechanized farming and less dependent on the kind of sugarcane cutting and so on that's being done, and the harvesting practices not being done, which is the bread and butter for so many farmers.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. I've been saying that I think that with all that's going on within the country, and there's a whole lot going on and a lot brewing within several unions. I think right now we have about at least 5 or 6 unions that a lot is going on. We have UBSFU, we have CWU, we have BWU, we have BNTU, we have PSU, we have BCWU, who just joined the fray now with their chairman saying that he's going to get more nibbler and Pina.
Yeah.
So, I know we have the cane farmers then. We clearly, and I've been saying this for some months, I believe the perfect storm is brewing. And I wouldn't, of course, pray and hope that it happens, because it could be very nasty. But we all know that the cane farmers up north, they have one warrior blood in a ring. And if it is that this negotiation with ESR, BSI doesn't turn out too well, and as you rightly said, it's not as easy as deciding that you'll go to Santander because of the cost factor in there to transport. So which means that they will have to really engage in a hard bargain with EHR, BSI, and we certainly want to wish them the best, because they are commoners like each and every one of us. Sister YaYa, you posed a question earlier today, and I invite, of course, the participants here as we are nearing the 8 o'clock hour to comment if they choose to. You said you would think that any government would always be on the side of the people, of the workers. And I said to you, I have never seen that happen. We spoke tonight extensively, or not, on the sugarcane industry, and we can also look at what's happening in tourism, and we see the potential, the great potential of both these industries and what they've done for the country. And drawing from your question, I want to ask, how the hell is it that no government has not taken the kind of nationalistic approach to say, look, this is the one of our strength. So rather than rely on foreign direct investment, why don't we find that capital to empower our people to be able to develop these industries, to ensure that the resources and, more importantly, the returns from these industries with such huge potential remains in country, thus guaranteeing and ensuring the expansion, the growth in our economy, and then development of the country into a first world economy. I will leave you know that for that and for comments. And not just tell me that politics. Tell me we're wrong. Because I have this concept that we could and we should always be growing from within rather than relying on these white men.
Yeah, $600 million in the banking system right now. Liquid system. Where is that money going? There's capital accumulated by whom? There's a concentration of capital by whom? Acquiring another bank and running over 40% of the banking sector right now. And where is his money going? You know, it's not going to real development per se in terms of any funding of any agro-industry, grassroots base, and so on. The whole mercantile sector takes up a portion of what's available by way of credit. And it's a question of what is credit otherwise available for. Why is money not being spent right now? Or why, in terms of economic development strategy, if there is one, has not there been an identification of activities that really move away from the neoliberal model, trickle down, and get into what would be perhaps the higher risk investments in roots enterprises? Harmonyville, get it going, pump some money there. Other roots activities, it's not happening because there's a risk element. And look at the state in a capitalist society, which we are, and the role of the state fixed in is support of the capitalist class. Who is this capitalist class? And we have traced their history, where they get the capital from, what they do with the capital. And it's comfortably lodged in the existing configuration of the money sector in terms of how it goes between merchants and some of the industrialists, meaning citrus and bananas and so on. They are all intertwined and they are large scale. So all I'm saying is there's a need for a rethinking of how capital accumulation will occur for investment purposes that supports identified strategic areas, which, if you look at what model are we using right now? We have a thing called Horizon 2030, which of course has been conveniently abandoned since the party in power has changed. We know they have a Horizon 2030 again. But that Horizon 2030 establishes a broad framework, which is reflecting a process of consultation that happened back in 2010, very far reaching, where people said, this is where we Belizeans want to be. And into that came what used to be called the medium-term economic development strategies. It's now called growth and sustainable development strategy. And under that, we found the various activities happening by sector that was supposed to reach certain development goals defined by the sustainable development goals. This is the year, or last year would have been the year when you size it up to see have the main pillars identified in the broad Horizon 2030. How far have those been advanced? And those broad pillars have to do with economic resilience, governance, human resource development, environment. What has happened there? There's been no evaluation of it. And then, of course, with the advent of COVID, you have a new BSR. The BSR has, you've been a new BSR because the whole economics of things have changed. The economic has contracted, but we're hearing now the SIB say, boy, 20% growth, there's a rapid recovery happening in certain areas and so on. That's left to be seen. This is second quarter. To come back to the core issue is, why has there not been systemic, structured, politically directed thing where the state is intervening? We're using a national bank to provide the funds for entrepreneurs to get into their respective areas of activity, together with the necessary technical support, because people have got to be prepared. It's agriculture where I say a lot of effort is going right now. Although I don't hear, well, we will have overproduction by next year and we try to get farmers to stagger on production so you don't have a block in the market. Everything. All of these things need careful management and preparation. And I don't know whether we are there yet to have that blending of technical capacity and development resources, with the state playing a role instead of being the running dog for the capitalists in our society. If I can put it as succinctly as that.
Okay. All right. So the mic is open for any final comments by those who are with us before we close off today.
Yeah, well, it's quite an interesting discussion tonight. I must say I listened intently and learned several things. I think the connection with what's happening up north with the stevedores is very interesting, because it's a set of workers who are there's some connection there, because the ships, or the produce that the farmers down north produce would have been shipped through the port, which is now affecting the stevedores. So there's a connection in that sense. But the thing that I find very ironic about it is the fact that whilst the BSI is saying that in fact they are moving for commercial reasons, it is their argument, the farmers are using against them now, that for commercial reasons they don't want to continue to operate under the same conditions. And so it's going to be quite an interesting scenario how it is going to be resolved. And I'm just hoping that the other unions in North, canefarmers unions, can see the need to amalgamate and create something better for themselves. No doubt, I believe perhaps Sista is behind some of this. I want to believe that there's no coincidence in what's happening, and what's happening also with BTL and so forth. There is a shift. Perhaps I want to believe it's more genuine for the purpose of farmers. I want to think so. Certainly in terms of BTL, I think it's more an example of rapacious capitalism happening. But everything that's happening is affecting workers. There is, as you described earlier, Breda Dean, there's a perfect storm brewing, and out of it could only come, in my mind, the need for workers to stand together and to use the opportunity to get better for workers. There's a tremendous opportunity now that we have based on what we're experiencing now. And it's always been the case that these kinds of events lead to opportunities that can be capitalized upon by the workers' movement to get better for workers and for the country, by extension. Because on the other side, the employers, they have always benefited from all of these things, and it's time for the workers now to begin to please turn it around for a bit, so workers can actually benefit. And so I see a very exciting period ahead. Recognizing that there might be some tumultuous moments, perhaps some violence, but maybe what's necessary for us to move forward, and
Spoken like a true revolutionary.
Out of it could only come better for workers, man, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if anybody else wants to say something on that, but there are two things. One quickly, BSI. There was a time when you could see the audited financial statements. You're not seeing those anymore. Another thing that used to be required to be published and lodged at the company's registry, well, not anymore. And the other side of it is the whole matter of what I call the need to become a political force for itself. That there are circumstances that are coming home coming together in you call it a perfect storm. But this is the reality of the political economy at a particular point when the politics of the situation and what we call the traditional political behavior, who I use the term state capture, because who have captured the state? But certain oligarchic business interests and legally linked interests and certain law firms and so on. And they have captured the state, manipulating the people's vote against corruption. And so they control the state. So if you look at the category of what is called state capture, you will see elements of that in this here, detail, smart issue where the state has been used to enhance the position of an old oligarch who was first identified to be the first post-independence state capturer. I know who we're talking about because he came in and advised about certain economic policies and the offshore banking industry and tax havens and so on as money makers for whom? Who have benefited from that in a real way, except the legal elites and himself, and controls the banking system. So bear that in mind that state capture is not a new phenomenon. It's something that's been around and how the state has been used, not for, of course, there have been benefits, but if you look at what's happening in education, it's still not a free education. What's happening in the healthcare system? If you get sick too bad, you can't afford going to the private sector hospital. It's beyond that. You have a whole umbrella queue to send somebody somewhere. It's really shameful, but it is a reflection of the failure of the system to trickle more. This is a trickle-down system, not enough as trickle to deal with this abject condition of housing and so on. How you arrange that and get that to be responsible, how you get the acceptance of an occupational and safety health, occupational safety and health act, which is really the key point there, because you are expendable. You have always been expendable. You work in class, we keep you in a reserve, and when we don't want to use you, we go to other sources which are cheaper than you. So where is your political strength? That is where this is the time for leadership in the workers' movement to analyze and understand all these dynamics and galvanize that into a political force that by yourself can impact.
Research.
Strategic alliances are necessary, yes.
Research, Brady. And put our position so we could get it done.
Yeah. So before I wrap up, I just want to say thanks to everybody that chimed in tonight and contributed and joined, whosoever, and to all who joined us tonight. I know that the one of the hot button issue on the table right now nationally surrounds the BTL Smart saga, and of course the conflict of interest issue being levied on the Prime Minister and his family. I want to end off by reminding Belizeans that when the current administration took over, we saw several moves that happened in the blink of an eye with the snap of a finger. And I'll go through a couple of them, and Brother Tate or anybody could chime in there. We have like 5 minutes. Quickly, as they got in, Central Bank vetoed the buyout of Scotia Bank to Belize Bank to the Lord. Quickly, they moved swiftly to approve the EIA for the cruise port at down that side there. Which other big move was made for the Lord? Brother Tate, for some reason, I may feel like I have At least 3 of them, and 2 one they slipped me. But while Brother Tate think about any other, I want to, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that made the first and biggest switch, because then no only gone with cell phone, and nobody they talk about foreign affairs, everybody may talk about labor, but then gone with cell phone, landlines, and data. And by the way, the foreign officers then they complain because the data loan the drop. But I say that to say this. In 2009, which we all seem to have forgotten, the then Prime Minister said, from the time I checked SpeedNet, and I'm quoting here, when I thought that in fact it was majority owned by Ashcroft Group, I discovered that there were 2 companies, Calabar Limited and Ridermark Ventures, that in fact together owned 55% of SpeedNet. But I didn't know at the time who controlled Calabar or Ridermark. I suspected it had to be Ashcroft Crowd because they address 4 Cork Street, because of the address 4 Cork Street. That is the old Colton House, almost directly opposite the entrance of the Radisson Fort George, that I happen to know Michael Ashcroft bought because I was trying to buy it myself and he beat me to it. So I know from then, companies headquartered there belonged to him, but it wasn't until later that I found out about the trust. And in the meantime, you see that 55% has been increased to 77.38% because on the 13th of January 2009, Jaime Briceño transferred 58 of his shares to a new Ashcroft company, Heaver Holdings Limited, of number 4 Cork Street, Belize City, for a consideration of $6,090,000. On the same date, Renan Briceño transferred 17 of his shares to the same Heaver Holdings Limited for a consideration of $1.785 million. You said I should have taken you to my confidence. How could I? Your family. I not say you. You are minority shareholders in SpeedNet, which is owned by Ashcroft. Your family, they work for Ashcroft. I say that because effectively after elections, some serious moves start getting made to satisfy the Lord. And we see those moves continue to be made as we speak. And I felt that it was important for me to remind our viewers, our listeners of this. With that, I'll say good night and God bless everybody. Please be safe. And if God is willing, we'll meet again next week. Same place, same forum, same time, 7 to 8 p.m., even though we're getting at the habit to run towards 8:15. All right, so good night, everybody, and God bless.
Take care. Let's see what happens with Central